Welcome into Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with CPA and personal financial specialist, Phil Putney. Now let's get rolling with today's show. Hey everybody, welcome into Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts. Phil Putney and myself back again to finish up our conversation on are good money habits holding you back. We're going to go through 5 more money habits where they're good habits to have to an extent, right? We want to be a little careful, just like anything, in moderation and balance. You know, you might say, well, being good is a bad thing. No, just be careful that you're not going a little too far, or just look for some areas where, that good habit could have a few places that could cause you to, to kind of hold back just a little bit. So we're going to continue that conversation. Yeah. How do you tweak it? We're going to continue that conversation with Phil. What's going on, buddy?
Doing good. Good.
Hanging out. We are
hanging out. We're
late January.
Yeah. Late January, 1st of February. Things are getting ready to kick off the tax season. So
that's late January already. It's crazy.
I know.
It's just time, just a tick. Time keeps on ticking.
The older you get, the quicker it happens too.
Yeah. So. Right.
It's all about perspective.
Yeah, for sure. I love that toilet paper analysis. I'm sure I've said it on here before, but it's like the closer you get to the end of the toilet paper roll, the faster it goes.
Yeah.
And that's how life is. It's like, wow, that's kind of deep, but weird.
It is.
Talking about toilet paper too.
Didn't think you were talking about toilet paper and bringing that perspective. But.
Yeah, right. It's better than the other. So let's finish up our conversation. We got 5 more of these to do. So we went through a couple of different good ones on part 1. Go check that out if you'd like. You can find it on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and of course you can check out. We've got a couple hundred of podcasts at this point. So feel free to go back and, check anything out you'd like. Hopefully you find some useful nuggets of information. And of course, if you need some help, reach out to a qualified pro like Phil. He is a CPA and a personal financial specialist. He's a personal financial specialist. And you can find him online at philstaxhacks.com, philstaxhacks.com. All right. So number 1 for this one, but the next in our list here, Phil, paying off debt early. Oh, come on now. This is a good habit, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it reduces those long-term interest payments. It's a great mental boost. Like if you pay off a nice bill, right, you're going, oh yeah, that feels good, or whatever. Yeah. So where's the bad here, Phil?
I mean, it really comes down to having a plan and what kind of debt it is, So, okay. I mean, if it's consumer type debt, autos, credit cards, student loans, things of that nature. Yeah. I mean, I would say paying that off early probably is a good thing for a lot of reasons. Number one, interest rates aren't going to be as good. Typically they're higher. That type of interest isn't deductible. So even if you do itemize, it's not a deductible interest.
Right.
Usually where this comes more into play is looking at home. Your home, either equity or the mortgage on the house, and should you pay it off early? And this is a discussion we have with clients all the time. Mm-hmm. And, I always say there's 2 rules when it comes to this. So I call it the head rule and the tummy rule, right? So the head rule, that's the math. I mean, I can run the math for you and show you, does it make sense?
Well, so, let's talk about that real fast.
Yeah, so paying off debt early from a math standpoint,
right?
Why it wouldn't make sense is a couple of things. Number one, I mean, if you've got a really good interest rate, I mean, if you were fortunate to refinance back when interest rates were sub 3%, mm-hmm. That's a great rate, so really think twice of refinancing that.
Because, So I got 40 grand, right? So I got 40 grand and I want to put 40 grand on the house, but if my mortgage is only 3%, and I could make, should I do that or should I make 6 or 7% in an investment? But there's risk, right? So I get the argument.
Risk and, pros and cons. You got to understand pros and cons, but it's that old concept of a penny saved is a penny earned, right? So if I take that 40,000 and pay off or put it towards a mortgage that I'm paying, 2.25% on, or 3% even, it's like earning 3%. And it's even less than that if you're itemizing on your taxes and are able to deduct that interest, because now the net after tax effect of that interest is even lower. So that's kind of the math side behind it. The other math when it comes to especially like a home equity or the house is when you're paying down a mortgage, you're building equity on a house, but equity in a home really does not grow. It doesn't give you any value. You don't get paid on it. Right. If you think it through, I mean, what grows or changes in value is the value of the house.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
So if the value of that house went up 10%, or, like it did over the last few years, 10 even more, Your bank didn't participate in that, right? They didn't all of a sudden change your mortgage to say, oh, well, it's worth 10% more. So you now owe us 10% more.
Don't give them ideas.
Yeah, don't give them an idea. They're not the IRS. Now the IRS kind of does that because they tax you on, what the growth value is. Not on the house. That's a whole other discussion. But anyways, the point being the value, the growth in an asset, the house, is going to happen, or same thing happens the other direction, right? If it loses value, it's going to go up or down, irregardless of what you owe the bank.
Gotcha.
So having equity in it doesn't give you any more growth, so that in the other downside to the equity is if you need that at some point, now how do you get it, right? So you paid off the house, now you're in retirement.
Right.
I need to get some equity back. I need to replenish. I put the 40,000 down on the mortgage, but now I want to buy a new car. Well, how do I get it? Well, now I have to go back and borrow it from the bank, and now it's a home equity, and that's a variable rate, and it's a higher interest rate.
Yeah.
Or you have to sell it. So, I mean, it's just more difficult to get the money back. So that's kind of the head rule.
Okay.
The flip side of that coin, though, is that I always call it the tummy rule. If at the end of the day, you've understand the math and it, even if it does make sense to not pay it down and keep the mortgage, it just makes you more comfortable to say, hey, I don't have a mortgage. And it does free up cash flow, right? I mean, it's sure. I don't have now to pay the $1,000 or whatever your mortgage is a month once that's paid off. So there's pros and cons to it. But at the end of the day, it comes down to having a plan and understanding the strategy.
Well, right. Yeah.
Don't make an emotional decision.
Don't talk to your advisor and talking to your spouse too, and go, okay, especially when you're getting close. Okay, we've got this excess money, and I can see where the last little bit we've had this question. We've had some emails and things. People are like, hey, I can get 5% at the bank right now, or, on a certain CD for 18 months or 12 months or whatever it might've been. And I can put that 40 grand in there and make 5% versus, paying off the 3% on the house. So I'm actually making 2%. And you can, break the math down and find out exactly where that's at. But at least if you did that, then you have the information and then you get to go, okay, what makes us happier? This little gain here, which is great. Or just, not having the house payment anymore, and that's when you can weigh that emotionally a little bit, I think. And that makes to more sense for a couple or an individual, either one, but it just makes more sense to be armed and then let the tummy kind of thing roll in.
And it's what I always tell clients when we're doing the planning process. And I mean, this is one of the first discussions we have. I tell them right up front, I said, look, my role in this process is never to tell you what to do. My role is, as we're looking at each one of these decisions, is to show you pros and cons. Here's both sides of that coin.
Yeah.
Now you can make an informed decision. At the end of the day, it's your plan. It's not mine. I have an opinion on what I think should be in there and why, and I'll let you know what that is, but it's your decision. It's your plan. You're going to live with the end results in it. And that's fine. As long as you know pros and cons, now you've got an informed decision. You're good with it. And if you start to question yourself later on, you have something to fall back on to say, well, this is why.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So I know we spent a little more time on that one than we usually, try to get the rest of these in, but some of these will go a little bit faster. But I really thought that one was a good one to kind of drill down on a little bit.
Pretty common one that comes up, especially
it's a common one.
People getting into retirement. So.
Yeah, for sure. All right, next one here. Staying informed by watching and reading financial news or listening to podcasts or watching videos on YouTube, right? Hey, nothing wrong with getting some extra information and being informed. That's what we try to do. We try to provide useful nuggets of information. But at some point, especially when you're talking about the bigger talking heads, and we've talked about this before, but I think a little bit, there's certainly a big movement amongst the world, but certainly a lot of industries where people like yourselves, have podcasts or video shows or radio podcasts or things of that nature. And you're actually still actively working versus somebody with the big platforms that are not. That's their empire. Their source of income is the fact that they're a big talking head. Well, they're no longer serving clients. They're no longer maybe even registered or licensed anymore, right? They get around that by being really more. Or maybe never have been, right? Yeah. Exactly. So there's a little difference in there. So there's nothing wrong with being informed, but as we've all learned over the last couple of years, the internet and things of that nature have gotten way out of control as to what's understandable to be truthful and not. right?
or
So
or
take the info
or
or
news
just
versus
or
fact versus
right,
opinion, and
right.
it's yeah, I always say
Take it and then talk to a pro who's actually in the
right.
trenches, and then go, okay, here's what I read, here's what I saw, does this work or would this work for me?
Right. Yeah, and I always say with any of these, you have to understand why they're doing it. I mean, to your point up front, right? If you look at any of the major news media, even some of the larger podcasts, why are they doing it? Is it because
Right.
they
At
want
this
to
point, it's become more
educate
about
and
right.
provide information? Yeah, maybe a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's about views. It's about advertising and
What's a
making
brand?
money in a
It's a
brand,
brand.
and
Yeah.
so I mean, and making monies from that alone.
Right.
From our standpoint, why are we doing this? I mean, I do it because I love to share and educate, and this is
Right.
my beliefs.
And talk to
how
me.
I work. Yeah, and I love talking to Mark. Every week. So, but I mean, it's just another avenue of me to kind of reach out to clients or prospective clients to
Right.
give my opinion, and hey, this is who I am. So if you start to work
Right.
with me,
Right.
you're not going to get surprised. This is who I am if you've listened to my podcast. And as you
Right.
see me here, this is life, which is
There
what
you
it
go.
should be
There
when
you
you're
go.
working with an advisor. And everyone has their
Exactly.
own opinion and strategies and thoughts and concepts, and that's great. Pick one that works with you, and kind of
Yeah,
follows your
exactly.
scenarios. So
yeah, there you go. So we won't beat that
yep.
one. That was pretty succinct, I think. We'll go to the next one here. Global diversification. Good money habit here. Spreads out growth, right?
Yeah.
It spreads out risk too, doesn't
It,
it? But does it also expose you to more risk as
it
well?
does. So diversification in general is a good concept, but I mean, you got to be really careful with it, with that whole
Global. Yeah.
concept of, even global diversification, so
Yeah.
international. Yeah. I mean, it has done much better than US over the last couple of years, so it's always good to have some international in there and, start to kind of blend that in. But with that, yeah, there is significant risk in that type of an investment as well. So just understand kind of the pros and cons when you're putting together a portfolio, and then even stepping beyond that. I think diversification, you've got to be careful in what is diversification, because,
Right.
and we've talked about this before, you can have, 10 different mutual funds and you think you're diversified, but at the end of the day, when you start to dig into what they have, well, no, I'm not. Out of the top 10 holdings in each one of those, I'm heavily weighted in this sector or that sector. So, truly
Yep.
understand how you're invested, and having diversification helps. I mean, it is one of those risk mitigation. It doesn't take the risk away, but.
Right. And, just be aware that, being more open to various things does provide chances for more risk.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
That's just kind of the basic concept there. All right. Let's see what else we got. Consistently, where are we at here? Consistently building the emergency fund. Okay. That sounds like a good thing, right? Especially if you're still a pre-retiree. Again, the emergency fund conversation takes on a different animal once you're into retirement, because everything's kind of an emergency fund in a way, because it's all the same pot. But if you're still working, you're a pre-retiree, or even before you get to pre-retirement, building an emergency fund is not a bad idea at all, right? But at some point, did you build it a little too well, right? And now are you losing the ability to maybe go out and earn more for the future you, right? Because you've got $100,000 in the bank, making zip, because it's, look, the savings account is not paying 5%, even if a CD might be right now. Savings accounts aren't. So, do you have $100,000 emergency on the horizon?
And we talked a little bit about this a couple of podcasts ago when we talked about lazy money. I mean, the concern here would be the concept of consistently building. So an emergency fund, absolutely have one. Especially pre-retirement, in retirement, the need for an emergency fund. I think the concept changes, right? Because it's no longer I lost my job for, I've got to have that fund to supply my need for 6 months. It's I now have lost my job on purpose, so I know what I need, and hopefully that money's coming from some other avenue. The emergency fund more now is for that true emergency. Something happens, I need to pay for whatever it is. I can write the check or charge the card and pay it off. And now I can figure out long-term, really, where should that money come from? So, I mean, that's the concept of an emergency fund.
Is the question of liquidity, does people get confused on the question of liquidity here, Phil?
I think some of it is,
because it's like, I think a lot of us are very used to especially if we're a bit older, right? We're like, hey, liquid means I can go to the bank and I can pull it out right away. But in today's world, is there really very many emergencies that would require you to do that?
Most investments are liquid. I always come back to our bucket strategy. We use the now, soon, later buckets where, now is truly that emergency fund, money in the bank, 100% liquid.
2 to 3 days, you can probably get it, right?
Yeah, you'll, transfer, write a check, whatever it is. It can happen pretty quick. That's for truly that emergency. Even anything invested, you can get it within 2 to 3 days, getting it into that bank account, so to speak, to do whatever you need. So there's not much that isn't liquid necessarily today. There are certain products that are, but it really comes down to more risk, right? Because the emergency fund doesn't have risk. It from a market standpoint, it's going to be the same value growing just a little bit over time. The risk you have there is more from an inflation standpoint. The old concept of growing broke safely, right? It feels really good. You see the balance go up a little bit, but if all of a sudden your cost of living has skyrocketed beyond that, well, all of a sudden that money in the bank isn't worth what it was a year ago. Even though the statement value might have gone up 3, 4, 5%, it can't buy the same goods that it did a year ago. So really, at the end of the day, there is risk there. You just don't see it. So
sometimes I think people do get tripped. Yeah, I think sometimes people get tripped up on the concept of liquidity.
Yes,
and especially like I said, if you're older, you're kind of just like, well, I got to have this much in the bank because if an emergency happens, I got to run down and be able to pull it right out. But it's like if you were replacing some big ticket item that insurance didn't cover all of it and you had to pay a portion of it, more than likely you only have to pay a percentage of it up front, which you should hopefully have, and then you could get the rest later. So
it's not like you're going to need everything within, like to your point, $100,000 in like 3 days.
Unless somebody kidnapped your dog and wants a ransom or something.
That's right. If you need $100,000 in 3 days because something really like crazy happened, hopefully you're talking to an advisor or somebody else and bouncing this idea off before you do it, because that sounds like an emotional decision.
Because to me, it doesn't sound like an emergency as much as I got a great deal on this
That's
RV.
Right. There's a great opportunity. Let's, I can't miss this.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's finish off our last one here, Phil, with patience is making a return here from just like kind of prior before. Patience with financial decisions in general, right? Or some sort of strategy of some kind, whatever that might be. Now, if you're doing the back of the napkin thing where you've been like, we're winging this ourselves, we're DIYing it, and we're going to be cautious with this, that, or the other. Okay, that's fine. There's some good there. And there's some good in doing your diligence when looking to work with a pro, right? Doing some research, making sure that you've watched a couple of podcasts or listened to a couple of things, checked them out online, see if they have a good reviews or ratings or whatever the case is. Go to finra.org, make sure that they're in good standing, things of that nature. Nothing wrong with doing your diligence. But when patience becomes our buddy procrastination, nothing happens.
Yeah. So, it's have a strategy, have a plan, but follow through with it then, right? So especially as it comes to retirement, because it's one of those scenarios that it happens before you know it. You know what I mean? I talk to younger people all the time. It's, they're thinking, oh yeah, it's 20 years down the road. I don't need to worry about that now. I got other things to do.
We're in our 50s. I'm 52, and I'm like, every few days I go, when did that happen?
Yep. For those of you with kids, I always liken it to kids. Think back to when you had kids. And they're brand new babies, your first child, you're thinking, oh, this is great. And they're growing up and you don't want them to grow quick. And, guaranteed, for those of us that have had kids and now they're moved on to, we've got grandkids, you look back, it's like, how in the world do I have a grandchild that's 8 years old? I can remember back when my child was, going through those same things my grandchild is today.
Or being 8 years old myself.
So, time just happens quick. So without a plan, without a strategy, it's going to go beyond you and you're going to miss it. You're going to miss opportunities. So there's no better time than today. When's the right time today? Sure. Start today, start small if you haven't started doing something, but start moving in that direction so that you have a plan. And that's where more than the patience is. As you've got that plan developed, now have patience with the plan. Don't do a plan and set it on the shelf and say, okay, well, I've done that. Check that box off. Don't have to do that again. Right, well, no, that's good. You started, But planning isn't an event, it's a process, right? So having a plan
I like that.
Develops the strategy. Now we know where we're going. We've got the roadmap. Now it's the process of following through on that plan. Okay, what was the action items out of that plan? What do we have to do at these various stages? Are we on track? Is it still the right plan? As things in my life changed? Has your life, your plan? I mean, has the tax law changed? Whatever it is, do we need to make adjustments? I mean, that's where the patience comes in. Same thing from an investment standpoint. You've got a plan, a strategy. If your investments did, 5, 6, 7% this year, but that's your risk tolerance, then don't be impatient when you look at the market and it did 20, or more, 30%.
Right.
Because that's not your risk tolerance, and that, understand why. There's nothing wrong with questioning and getting that perspective, but have the patience and understanding to know why it's the way it is. So,
don't let that little guy over there go,
or
you should have got
your
more.
buddies when you go out and watch the game and they're talking about, oh man, I got my statement from last year. You ought to see what I did in the. So those kind of people, I always say, well, ask them for their statement at the end of 2022. They don't want to look at that one. That was.
They may have taken a little more risk. So. Exactly. Well, there you go, folks. There's 10 over the last 2 podcasts, good money habits that, just some places to think about. Is it holding you back, in some ways? Hopefully we give you some fun things to think about there along the way. And of course, as always, if you need some help, again, reach out to Phil or a qualified professional of some type. Make sure that you're talking with a certified financial planner or CPA, financial specialist, personal financial specialist, whatever it might be, but find the right person that's for you. And that's often why many advisors, and financial professionals offer those initial consultations complimentary, so you can see if it's a good fit for you. And they may have other resources just like we do here with the podcast. So it's a great way, as Phil said earlier very well, it's a great way to get to know them. What you see is what you get. So, that's a great way to kind of break the ice as well. So if you'd like to check out more episodes, if you're new to the podcast, find us on Apple, Spotify, or the YouTube platform, all sorts of places, audio and video form there. Just hit the little subscribe button if you'd like to do so. That's a great way to do that. And you can find it all simply, if you don't want to type in Phil's Tax Hacks in the search box of those apps, which you could do, you could type in Phil's Tax Hacks in your phone and just go to the website and pull it up that way, and also get some time on Phil's calendar at philstaxhacks.com.
Phil? Investment advisory services offered through AFS Wealth Management. The content of this program is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. Investments and/or investment strategies involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will achieve its objectives.